I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Yuwid and Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all First Nations, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who may be watching today's episode. Before I start, this is just a reminder, Shit's Fucked is based on my own and guest speakers' experiences with sobriety, mental health and trauma. Each person's experiences and recovery are different. I am now certified in alcohol and other drugs. I am a certified lived experience AOD representative, and I am a lived experience addiction and mental health speaker, hoping to help as many people as I can to create lives they had only ever dreamt of. Welcome to Shit's Fucked. I'm your host, Paris, and I'm here to talk to you about all the shit that is fucked. Because why not, right? Why not? So a little bit about me. I was an alcoholic for 17 years. I was a meth addict for 10 years. And I was actually also an escort for 3 years as well. So it's been a ride. It has been a journey. I am now about a year and a half sober from meth. I have completely changed my relationship with alcohol, and I'm just living the best life at the moment. I'm just living a life that I honestly had only ever dreamed of, and I didn't think I would actually reach. So the reason I started this podcast is actually from my own journey in recovery. You know, I realized it was really, really difficult to know where to start, right? Like there's so much out there, and I was actually really naive to a lot of it. Like I wasn't very educated around what supports were available. I mean, I knew there was NA, I knew there was AA, I knew there were drug counselors, but other than that, that was about it. And, you know, all three of those options were not very desirable. I did not want to go to any of those. So, you know, it took me till I was about in my 8th year of meth addiction to even see a drug counselor. And, you know, most people don't even get to that point, right? So this podcast, I want it to be a platform for people to be able to access information to all of these resources and this support without having to, you know, take the leap and go to the drug counselor. I mean, of course, get there in the end if you can, but I think it's just very valuable to have this information all in one place, and then you can kind of make more informed decisions around your mental health and your well-being. You know, I talk to a lot of people that are in the industry. So whether that's AOD, mental health, I've had conversations with paramedics, psychologists, people working in rehabilitation centers as well. But then I've also got a lot of other people who've got lived experience and shared their stories. So it kind of gives people a bit more of an insight on, you know, what steps did they take? You know, there's multiple ways to healing. There is not one way is the right way. You know, there's many, and I don't want people to be discouraged if they try one path and it doesn't work for them. You know, that's not the be all and end all. So that's the point of this podcast. This is why I do it. I also want to be a bit of a bridge as well between the people that are waiting on or stuck on wait lists, who can, again, get a bit more information. Maybe I can provide some tools in our episodes as well. That's something that I have done in the past. So, you know, you're always walking away with something, whether that's a resource or a new life toolkit that you can put on your tool belt. So that's what I'm here to do today, and I hope you enjoy it. So for today's episode, I have guest speaker Chuck LaFlange. He is the host of the podcast Ashes to Awesome. He's Canadian born. He's actually residing in Thailand now, living his best life. And he has his own lived experience with addiction. He actually was in active addiction for over 25 years and is now really focused on spreading the message, you are loved. So the reason that Chris is spreading this message now is actually because of his mum, Norma, and the experience he went through with her on his own journey. So something I just wanted to read out quickly from his website because I think it's just really, really beautiful. So Chuck's mum, Norma, had used the phrase, you are loved, at the end of many erratic conversations with Chris. as such, when that day came, that comes for so many people that have suffered in addiction, and the exhaustion kicked in, he knew he was in fact loved and reached out to her for help. So the whole point of that for Chuck, aka Chris, he really wants people to understand that yes, you do have to set boundaries sometimes. Yes, it is really, really difficult to still sometimes show love for someone who is experiencing addiction, because it can be so harmful to a loved one as well. You know, you go through it with them. But I guess in the sense of the power of them knowing that they are still loved, and knowing that there is someone that they can go to when they do hit those points, when, you know, when their perspective changes, and something happens, and a light flicks, like it switches, and all of a sudden, you know, they're over it and they want to get some help, knowing that there is someone out there that still really loves them, and knowing that they can go to them for help is just really, really powerful and can save lives. So that's the point of his message. I think it's a beautiful one, and he interviews some incredible people on his podcast. Highly recommend. So before we dive in, I do want to give a big fat trigger warning. We do talk a lot about active addiction and that lifestyle, as well as PTSD, trauma. So please just be mindful while you're watching, and I hope you enjoy it. Welcome, Chuck, from Ashes to Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. How you doing?
I'm doing really good. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's
Yeah.
It's nice to be in contact with somebody who shares the same sunlight as I do, because it's a rare thing for me, right? So
I know. We're an hour difference, hey? Like, because you're in Thailand, I'm over here in Perth. I think it's an hour difference.
Yeah, it's only an hour apart, right? And normally I'm used to like the 12-hour, almost exactly. It depends on where, of course, in North America, right? But most of the people I deal with in a day, of course, are 12 hours offset from me. So it's we're opposite sunlight schedules, to say the least. So yeah,
I know. And I know, like, I guess for our listeners out there, Chuck is actually, are you Canadian born?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
So from Canada, is now living in Thailand. He's got a podcast called Ashes to Awesome, which is based around addiction.
Yes.
So what I wanted to dive in with you today, and I like going pretty much straight off the fucking bat here, Chuck, I hope you don't mind.
Australians are so foul-mouthed. I love it.
I'm sorry, but I don't fuck around now. I'm not here to fuck spiders. Let's just leave it at that.
It's okay. So stop. You're not here to what?
I'm not here to fuck spiders, mate.
Okay, now this is some sort of Australian term, right?
Oh yeah, it's very common slang. It's like, I'm not here to fuck around. So that's basically what it means.
I'm not here to fuck spiders. Okay, now I'm sorry. This is your show. We're going to keep on topic as much as we do, but why spiders? Like, what does that even come from? Where does that come from?
Like, none of our slang makes sense, mate. Like, it's just one of those things. It just sounds good and it works.
I'm going with it. I'm going to run with it. I'm going to try and mainstream that into my Canadian, North American audience, as it were. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Do it.
I'm going to appropriate your culture, as it were. So yeah.
Join us, True Blues. All right. Well, I'm going to jump straight in, and I'll just start with the first question, which is, can you share a little bit about your personal journey? You obviously don't have to go into everything with addiction, and how it led you to where you are today.
I mean, all of us in recovery have told our story many a time, and I'm certainly no exception to that. So I grew up in a very normal household, normal, with the quotes, pretty balanced. I had a twin brother, a younger brother, pretty normal family life. We lived on an acreage. I could canoe, horseback ride, sail, motorbike, and snare gophers all in one day, right? And that was our normal life, absolutely, right, for us. And then, Mom was strict, but not overly. Well, she was pretty strict, right? And I suppose, and again, this is with benefit of hindsight, but and more and more as my recovery journey continues, really, I think back to some of the things that kind of led me to where I am, or where I got to, I should say. And by all appearances, it was a very normal life, but at the same time, I never did fit in. And all the things that you hear from people that have run the gamut of addiction, I was always just kind of a black sheep in just about everything I did. And when I was 14 years old, I decided I'd had enough of structured home living, and I went out on my own. And I left home. And even then, I had a job. I tried to go to school. That didn't work out. I ended up leaving school with a grade 9 education. Never did stick enough through grade 10. And I was on my own. And I think I did okay. Well, I didn't do okay. I was into a lot of trouble, but drugs weren't kind of my driving factor back then. It was more just surviving.
Yeah, right.
And then around 17, I just gotten out of jail. I tried coke for the first time. Really liked that. It was crack the first time that I tried it. And then I dabbled with that a little bit, and then started, snorting coke. And from that, it was like 20 years of snorting, 19 years and 9 months, actually, because I quit smoking crack. And then I went almost 20 years without getting back onto it. And I was snorting the whole time, gambling, drinking, highs and lows. I would blow up my life. I'd get it back together. I'd do quite well. I started a few businesses that were somewhat successful. And without fail, every time I did really well, I found myself blowing it all up again. Right.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way. I got married in 2017. 7 months later, we were being separated. I had, we owned a business. We had some vape shops. Inside a year, it was just this whirlwind thing where I went from selling them out of a truck, out of my pickup truck, like meeting people in parking lots, like I was doing drug deals, to having 4 retail locations in 4 different cities in a year.
Wow, that's hectic.
It went crazy. And there was some success there, but I was also left, I was running the road a lot on my own. I wasn't being a good guy. I was gambling and snorting and all this stuff, right? Living out of motel rooms for the most part. And that led to our divorce and the fail of the company. And I was I never stopped with the snorting and gambling. But I did get a full-time job back in management because, my CV is quite, it would certainly not what you would think somebody with 25 years in active addiction would look like. I got a job back in management, and then I lost that job. With the benefit of hindsight, it had everything to do with the dope, right? I wasn't sleeping right. That was turning me into an asshole when I was at work, and I wasn't reliable and all the things that typically happen with somebody that's living the lie that addiction can be. And then this time around, when I lost my job, all of my life, the one thing I could always fall back on was dealing dope, right? It was a constant for me. Even when I was working, I'd always have kind of a side hustle doing that somewhere, somehow, or something nefarious, right? And this time when I lost my job, I just went headlong into it again. And I did quite well for a few years. I mean, as well as you can. And then I picked that pipe back up. And that was the beginning of a very quick downhill slide for me, right?
And what year was that?
That would have been 2018-ish, something like that. 2019, somewhere in there. I suppose I could probably figure that out if I went back and looked hard. But the moment I picked up that pipe, and I knew it when I was taking that first toot, but I didn't care. There was the best resentment we always have, is relationship drama. That's like, oh, I broke up with so-and-so. And then there's your addict brain going, I got you. And right. It was, I know how to deal with those feelings. And did I ever? It was just this, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
That progressed really fast for me. I started, stealing from Peter to pay Paul, all the things. And the amount of money that I was owing was huge. I think at one point I was in for 16,000 to one guy and 20,000 to another.
Oh, Jesus.
And trying to balance that, right?
Yeah. So that's a lot of money over your head. That's very stressful.
It is, right? And then the whole while trying to smoke as much crack as I possibly can and keep women around and all the things that go with that lifestyle. And then I decided I was going to sell the business. I sold it for a significant amount of a lot of money, actually, my selling business. And I went to go take final payment, and the deal was, rather than take installments, he'd offered me a large amount of fentanyl. And the day I went to go pick it up, I was 20 minutes away from going to sell it. And the guy that I picked it up from had been being followed By this point, I was a known drug dealer. They saw us do the exchange. Boom. It's 20 minutes away from my last drug deal. What probably wouldn't have been, but in my mind, that was the last one.
Let's be honest here.
Yeah. And I got nailed with 5 ounces of fentanyl, which was enough to look at some serious federal time. I ended up beating that charge, but at that same time where I was, meth and fentanyl had just become meth had been around for quite a while. Fentanyl was pretty new, but the combination of those two things changed it changed the environment, changed the whole scene, the drug scene, right? You've got one drug, the fentanyl, of course, being the powerful opiate that it is, people will do absolutely anything for. And then you've got meth keeping them awake for 2 weeks at a time doing it, right? So the combination of the two was just, it changed everything.
They call it the hot shot here in Australia. Have you heard that term?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as a speedball back home or whatever. But it's not even when I'm speaking to that part of it. It's not even when you do them together. It's the fact that you do them both, right? You know what I mean?
Like polydrug use, One's picking you up, one's putting you down.
Yeah, right. And it's just, it changed the landscape. I gone my entire drug career, again with the air quotes, without ever even coming close to thinking I might be getting robbed. To, in the course of 2 years, everything you can imagine happening. I was taken hostage. I was house invaded. I was tortured. I was beaten to a fucking pulp over and over. I was robbed. When I was taken hostage, I knew I was going to die a half dozen times that night. There was no doubt in my mind that this was it, right?
And was that like a deal gone wrong, or like what?
No,
what was going on there?
Something like that. It was planned. I was set up, right? I was set up. And
okay.
These setups, it was always women, but I was in transactional relationships on some level throughout all of this, right? And that's just the nature of being around.
Which you often are when you're in that world. Let's be honest.
Yeah, right. So there was a very rare. I mean, there was a few genuine connections in that time, but it was a very, very rare thing. And messing with the wrong women and having the wrong attitude and doing it, it's not to blame because they're like me, right? They're all just trying to get by. Everybody's just trying to figure this shit out. So I don't say that with any sort of resentment. And when it was all said and done, I was left broken in a way that is hard to verbalize, right? PTSD had become by far the biggest problem in my life. The addiction was, it really was the solution, right? Like, it was just like anything to not feel that holy terror that would just creep up, and it was an awful thing. Discovered I'm never going to inject anything. We've all heard people say it. We've all said it. Meth was never my thing. I never got into it. It just didn't work for me. And then I injected it once, and it was like, oh, now I'm home. For me, that was an interesting thing though, because now my habit went from $500 a day down to like $10 a day. It's because meth is so fucking cheap, because it's gross. That's why it's so cheap. But for me, it wasn't as compelling as crack was, or to do it so often. So for like my last probably 5 months of my active use, I was high every day, but I was probably sober more often than I was high, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
And then I got the news that my dad was sick with cancer, and fuck, I couldn't make it in time to get back to him. I quit that day. The day I found out, I was like, no, I'm going to stay sober now. Like, I can't, I'm going to get home back to Calgary, where he was, where I'm from. And I couldn't get there in time. And then it was about 2 weeks later when he passed. And that was October 21st, 2022. And I got so fucked up that night. I was in bad shape, but I woke up the next day and said, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to go back. I'm going to, so I went back home to Calgary, reconnected with my family, reconnected with my recovery community. Not even, I shouldn't say reconnect. I reconnected with friends who I hadn't talked to in close to 20 years. And it was just, everybody welcomed me back, right? Everybody welcomed me back into the fold. And it's something that I talk about very, very often. Those last years of active addiction, I should say at one point, a year before this, 10 months before this, my mom, I had reached out to her. She lived 40 minutes away from where I was. She came into the city. She picked me up. in mere hours after I called her. She had an apartment set up for me in the town that she was in. You know, she got on me about these fucking gratitudes, the daily gratitudes, which is, you know, are part of my daily, you know, every episode.
Oh, that's amazing.
I'll tell that story real quick. So, because it explains so much of, you know, you are
Of
loved.
course. Yes, please share.
My mom had changed gears. I'd gone 2, 3, 4 years at a time without being in touch with my family, right? Like at all. Zero communication. And
is that because you found it hard to connect with them, or did they have to set boundaries?
No. So for me, it was easier for me to stay away. So I wasn't like, they never had to deal with the stealing and the violence and the chaos and all of those things, right? That come with loving someone who's suffering an addiction. But I would just disappear, right?
Yeah.
And it gets to this thing where it's been so long, I feel like a piece of shit. Oh, look, I have a coping skill for that. I know how to deal with, you know, feelings that suck. And then when I did have interactions, they were chaotic and erratic because they are, because, you know, I was such, you know, I was a hot mess. But my mom switched gears, and she would end every conversation with, "You are loved." And she would randomly message me with, "You are loved." And just this constant. And it took like a year for it to kick in.
Oh.
Right. It took like a year. So when I say that to people, as, you know, to loved ones, because that's, you know, what our show tends to focus on so much, is, you know, how important that is. It doesn't just work automatically. And I think people want fast results. It's one of those things that over time you're breaking down years and years of preconceived bullshit or whatever. And what I like to say is, those last years of active addiction, it was the boot on my neck was my perceived lack of connection.
Yes. My
family was there. My friends were there. I had convinced myself, my addict brain had convinced myself that they weren't. Right. And what a great way we have to deal with those feelings. So I was in the middle of another, like, it was awful. I couldn't even go outside most days without being absolutely irrationally terrified. Right. Because of like just the trauma was so ugly. And I was hiding in somebody's basement where I wasn't really supposed to be. But they'd kind of let me hold up there. And I texted my mom and said, "Can you please come get me? I can't do this anymore." Right. And she did. But, you know, so she came and got me. She fucked her and these two friends, two hardcore 12-stepping friends of hers, wonderful people. She came and picked me up because I was in the hood in the city I was in, and she wanted no part of driving in to pick me up there. So she got some friends to bring her in and whatever. But they picked me up to take me back to that city, to Moose Jaw, where they had this apartment kind of set up. And I say set up, it was a mattress on the floor is what it was, right? That was it, literally.
It's something.
Right? Yeah, and a bag of groceries. And she says, "I know you're going to cocoon for a few days, but that's okay," right? So that's what I did. But on the way back, so much was happening, you know. For me, we stopped and grabbed a burger at Burger King, and it was probably the first real meal I'd had in definitely days, maybe weeks, right? Like just, you know, and I was just so grateful. I was just like, fucking, if it was a line, I'd have snorted it. Like I was just, you know, giving her. And they're talking at me about all these things. You're going to go to meetings and do this and this and this. It's like, fuck, man. Like there's so much happening right now. My whole world just changed. I have uncertainty. I have PTSD, trying so hard to come to the surface. And that was probably addiction driving that, because, hey, look, like you really need to cling on here to something. And she started talking to me about these fucking daily gratitudes. And I'm like, I remember taking a bite of my burger. Like, so specifically remember this. I wish you'd shut the fuck up about the gratitudes right now. Because it was just like, one more thing, right? Like, could we just stop, please?
Like, can I just finish my damn burger?
Yeah, like, can I be grateful for this? Can I fucking do that? Right? Like, and of course she did, and she kept going on about my mom never would shut up on something like that, even if I wanted her to. And of course I never said that. I would never say that, right? And I'm glad that she didn't. Fast forward a few relapses later, whatever, you know, she basically punched me with this notebook and said, you know, it's time to start doing your daily gratitudes because it makes a big difference, right? And at this
it's
point,
so true.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I will, right? So I made it 30 days for the first time ever. ever since I was 14 years old, save, I guess, when I was in juvie, I probably went 30 days without a drug. But outside of that, I'd never gone, especially as an adult, 30 days without some sort of substance, drugs or alcohol, right? So I made that first 30 days with the help of the rooms, 12-step in it. But then I found a resentment at the end of the 30 days, which we're always looking for in early recovery. I found it, and I never did go back to the rooms after that. Not on any sort of regular basis. I've been back a couple times just to show up, but I couldn't go back to zero. I put so much into my clean count. The shame of going back to zero didn't work for me. And there were some other things going on there, just whatever bullshit drama, resentments, let's be honest.
Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah, right. So, and then that last relapse, because of the shame I felt going back to zero and not going back to those rooms, because I was ready to after a day, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And that turned into 10 months. And then my final, and then of course that 10-month culminates with the sickness and then, subsequent death of my father. So I went back and I never looked back after that. Right. So that's my story in a nutshell, as it gets to me to where I want to embrace recovery and all the things that comes with that. And then since then it's been another adventure. Right. But,
Yeah. I mean, so you started getting sober in 2022, did you say?
Yeah, October 21. I just had my 18th month on the 21st of
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Wow, you've come a long way. And honestly, it sounds like it's been a bit of a roller coaster for you. And I mean, yeah, it's really tough. Like, the cycle of addiction is so hard to break out of. So many people don't. I mean, we are some of the lucky ones. There's a lot of people that don't even survive it, unfortunately. Right. And so, I'm grateful that you're here, you're doing this, you're on a mission now with your own podcast, and I want to hear more about that. So please tell me a bit more about Ashes to Awesome, what inspired you to start it, and, what are you getting up to?
Well, so but before that 10-month relapse, when I was enjoying that 30 days, I'd started a blog. And of course, my real name is, Chris Horder. I don't really care who knows that anymore. But at that point, anonymity was still very important to me. And I had this kind of alter ego that I used to use for like nefarious things on Facebook, Chuck LaFlange, right? Yep. So I called it Recovery of LaFlange. And I was just writing a daily blog on Facebook and had immediate success. I think day 5, I had 7,000 views, if you can imagine, right?
That's so good.
It's crazy, right? There's some luck involved there, most certainly, but I had a ton of people kind of cheering me on, and I found immediately that I was able to connect with loved ones, right? People who are in active addiction typically aren't tuning into a podcast, typically aren't tuning into, a blog. They're out there trying to survive, right?
Yes.
I feel like podcasts like mine, like yours, when it comes to being an inspiration, I think that's more for the people that have already found recovery or are very sober curious, if nothing else.
Yes.
And are looking for some community, right? So for myself, I thought I immediately connected with moms, essentially, like a lot of moms, right? Some moms love me for whatever reason, right? And it's always been like that. So part of the resentments that I had found at the end of that 30, I think it was 34 days or something, was kind of centered around the blog. And so when I came back into recovery, I had zero urge to do it again. I had let the resentments take the fun out of that for me, but I knew I wanted to do something. I have a voice, and
and you have a great voice, by the way. So good to listen to.
$2.99 a minute, and I'll read you poetry. Right? So, I was struggling really, really hard in early recovery with the PTSD. Really, really hard. There's days when I would go get on a bus and just turn around. Right. It was awful. It was because now I don't even have the dope. Now it's, they say the worst thing about recovery is getting all your feelings back, and the best thing about recovery is getting all your feelings back. Well, it's such a cliche, and it's so fucking true.
It is.
I was trying to process all this crap without my fix. And my mom had said to me, so like getting a real job wasn't going to happen for me. right? Not at that point. It was just, that was impossible. I was on
Still
social
early
services.
days.
Yeah, right. And my mom said, if you could do anything, what'd you do? I said, I'd write, but I could ruin that for myself now. Like my heart's just not in that anymore. And she said, if you thought of a podcast, I think it was about a week and a half later, I started a podcast.
Wow. So your mom's actually been quite an influence, hasn't she?
Oh, through all of it. There's so much, even now, so much. When I first started, I called it Dopey Canuck. There's a giant podcast out of the US called Dopey with Dave Mannheim. Yeah, and I called it Dopey Canuck, and I liked, I'm being, kind of cheeky or whatever. And no, I was trying to take some of his clout. That's what that was, right? And I think
I love
didn't
the
even
honesty.
admit that to myself, right? Well, and that's what it came down to. Well, Dave, it took him about 6 weeks to catch wind of this and send me a message and say, "What the fuck, man?" Right? So he told me, there's some personal reasons that show is, his and very close to him. Like I couldn't have ever dented him. The guy's he's the OG of recovery podcasts, right? There's nobody bigger than him in the field, but for him, it was just very personal that I didn't do that. And that so he asked me to change the name, and I did. And my mom, previous to that, said, when you figure out your why, the rest will come in. And so we changed it to Ashes to Awesome. I was about 6 weeks into it when I did that. At that point, I was telling a lot of funny, stupid stories still. And shortly after that is when I went back and I just deleted all of those episodes. So like if you're trying to serial listen, there's actually, you can't go from 1 to 20 because there's a bunch in there that are gone. I think I removed 16 episodes in total.
And were they just stories from,
just war stories from addiction days?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of them were hilarious and all that, but it's not the message that I at first I thought, well, I can get people's attention with being funny. It's, I like to think that I'm a funny guy. But in the end, some of it felt kind of gross, and especially now when I think back to it, but it's early recovery. Like there's so much to figure out, right?
Hindsight is a bitch.
Yeah. Right. So with Dave's help, really, when he called to complain at me that day, I think neither of us could have realized how, like, it was way outside of our awareness what that was going to do for me, because it was then that I was able to find my why. And since then, it's just been like, it's been nuts. I've got 238 episodes. I just released 238 today. When I started, it was with a Windows 7 laptop, no microphone, no headphones, no know-how whatsoever. I couldn't make a meme. Like I couldn't make a meme, let alone edit and all that shit. And so it was crazy. Like I can't listen to those episodes now. I go back and I'm just like,
Cringe. Yeah.
Even watching some of the video episodes, which happened around 150, 120, 150, somewhere in there. I can't even go back and watch those because it's just come so far, right?
But you got to start somewhere. I don't have many episodes, and there's already, I've started doing things different in season 2, and I look back at some in season 1, and I'm like, fucking hell, that could have been better.
Oh yeah, and that's going to keep happening for you too, right? Like
it will.
It's like I say, when I was 18. I thought 12-year-old me was dumb. When I was 28, I thought 18-year-old me was pretty dumb. And then, now I'm 47 this week. And I'm like, 37-year-old was pretty dumb. Like we never stop learning. We're always going to go back and look at our shit, right? Yeah. So the recovery thing, though, is really funny. Because I know we're going to get to Yatra, right? Yes. I guess that's probably next on the list now. So
it is actually, yeah.
I'll help segue into that. So
yeah, go for it.
I'm doing the podcast. I get Mike Miller, who's the head clinician / co-founder at Yatra, on the show. I met him through some mutual contacts, and he's all about trauma. He's a trauma therapist. Where addiction is a smoke, trauma is a fire. It's his belief, and I couldn't make a case against it that the vast majority of addiction is self-soothing behaviors as a result of trauma, right? Mm-hmm. And whether that's big T trauma, little T trauma, meaning the big stuff. The violence, sexual abuse, the car accidents, those are the big T's. And you got your little T stuff like, abandonment issues and things that happen when you're a kid that are probably often outside of your awareness, right? Stuff that you've forgotten about in a conscious way and are sitting there in your subconscious kind of controlling way more of your behaviors than you think, right? So he came on, we did this, we recorded an episode about trauma. I hit stop recording. He said, "You have some shit you need to deal with, man." Right? Like it was so obvious to a professional because I was still like, I was I've been about 6 months in then at that point, maybe 7 months into my recovery at that point. And I was very, very fortunate. He said if I could get to Thailand, that he would offer me a scholarship to partake in things at Yatra and at the residential treatment program. And they do, like, it's the craziest thing. Well, I'll get to that, I guess. It's about 3 months later, 4 months later. In between that time, he's talking. He's like, if you can get here, man, like, it's so less expensive to live in Thailand. And it is. It's crazy less expensive. And it's like, what do I need to work? I don't have a wife, kids, girlfriend, all that stuff at home. All I need is an internet connection, and I can work from anywhere in the world. She's like, you might want to consider just sticking around for a while, right? And it seemed like such a pipe dream. And of course, I am so traumed out. I say it sometimes, like, I'm just a hot mess that way. It's like, fuck, I'm gonna take an adventure to the other side of the world, and but over time, he talked me into it without talking me into it.
Right. Yeah.
And then there came a point where, and throughout this time, as I'm in Calgary trying to recover, I'm on to house 3 now, where addiction is on the other side of the bedroom door. And that was not part of the plan. Right. Like, I'm renting rooms at these different houses, and it's like, sober house. Yep. And then, no, it's not. Fuck. Right. So, I'm having to stay clean through that. Thankfully, I have the podcast to keep me going at that point. It's my recovery community. I live, eat, shit, and breathe. I've been working at it for 16 hours a day since the day I started. And so that helped keep me focused and, on my recovery path. But I kept hearing this thing about this metaphoric fence in recovery, where you get from where you're talking about the addiction and then you start living the recovery. Yeah. You know what I mean? Where it stops about not wanting to be, it stops being about not using and starts being about growing. Right.
Yes.
And I come to this kind of this last point in where I was living in Calgary. And again, there it is on the outside of my bedroom door. And I'm just stressed. And I'm like, I call my mom. I'm like, I got to go. Like, I can't stay here anymore. Right. I need to move again. And I'm sorry, but can I please get some help? And I just I'm a 45-year-old man at this point. 46. No. And I'm like begging for help from my family. And it's such a hit on the pride, and I hate it. Right.
I've been there. Don't worry.
Yeah. Right. It sucks. And I've always been a provider throughout, because, it's just who I've been. So now I'm this taker, and it sucks. And Mom says, here's the thing, we can help you with rent and damage. Yeah. Like, we're not going to see you homeless, but why don't we just help you get to Thailand? You can give that a go. Yeah. Right. Like, it's the same, like, by the time we pay for it, we might as well pay for that. It's the same amount of money. Right. So, okay, fuck it. Let's go. Right.
You took a chance.
Yeah. So I should also say that Mike, when he offered me that, he also that day at the end of that recording came on as a sponsor for me. So now I have, yeah, right. It's just an amazing guy. So I've got a couple sponsors happening now. I've got, like, very, very little income, but in Thailand, it goes so much further. Right. So, like, my rent, I've told you this before, is equivalent to 140 Canadian dollars, which is, I think we're pretty close to the Australian dollar, right, as far as value goes. And that's a 2-level duplex.
That's just wild. It's just unheard of.
It's crazy, right? So I was fortunate there. I had some sponsors, and then I was able to. That was going to be enough to live off of here. Not a lavish lifestyle by any standard. I mean, I count my potatoes more often than not. Right? It's literally, it's just this morning I was like, okay, I got 4 sweet potatoes, and this is 1, 2, 3. Yeah, right. It's looking at me through 2 days. Sweet, right? But but my worst day here is better than my best day a year and a half ago, right? Like, my absolute worst day. So I got to try, backing up a little bit there, I got to Yatra on November 1st of last year, and I experienced the most amazing thing. Everything about that place. When I walked in, his admissions person, Stacy, we're going, there's all sorts of paperwork that's got to be done. And she says, so do you have any food allergies? I says, no, I hate spicy shit, but I just moved to Thailand. So I guess I better get over that. And she says, no, you're at a trauma center. Lunch is not going to be stressful. Right? Like, we'll just make not spicy stuff for you. Don't worry about it. And I was like, oh, which at the time I was like, oh, that's cool. But very quickly it was like, that's the environment I'm in. Right. And from there, Tai Chi, yoga, mindfulness, meditation, ice baths, internal family systems therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR therapy, which is changed my life. I get emotional when I think about it because of how fucking grateful I am that this thing that was controlling me in everything I did, freedom from it, right? So that's what they did for me at Yatra, and I will sing. If Mike wasn't a sponsor, I'd sing their praises, right, from the rooftops. I can't see a day when I stop doing that. I have to say, if I won the lottery, it'd be like everybody I know is getting a month at Yatra. Like, come over here. You have to do this, right? Like,
so did you spend a month there? Was it like straight 4 weeks?
It was actually 40 days that I ended up spending. But yeah. Right. So, but because when I first got there, I was their last client. Actually, they were moving to, they were in Phuket, Thailand, and they were moving to Krabi. It had been a plan to move for some time. So it was like, well, if I'm going to move anywhere, I might as well move to where they are, right? So, so the day they moved to Krabi from Phuket is the day that I left the center and moved into my own place in Krabi, right? So that's how I end up here in Krabi. And so Mike and I still keep in touch. We see each other now and again, get together and argue politics over supper or whatever, right?
Love it.
Yeah. It's the environment there. It's just everything about it is so great, And the more that I have Mike on the show, as you know, he's been on a bunch of times, and of course he's scheduled to be on yours. And
he is. Even the next Thank you for the introduce.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I can tell you, who's anybody that's interested in what I'm saying right now or listening at all, Mike is top 3 guests I've ever had on the show. I think I've had him on 6 or 7 times now, and just everything he says is it comes from a place of knowledge, of compassion, of lived experience. It's a very rare mix of attributes that Mike brings to the table. And as a guest for a podcast, you just can't get any better than that, right? So
absolutely. I mean, I had a brief chat with him the other day. So yes, thank you again for introducing us, because I didn't even know that there was a trauma center over in Thailand. And like me being in Australia, like we're not that far away from Thailand.
No, there's a pretty well-worn path, right? Between the two, right?
Yeah. So I
he's trained a whole bunch of therapists in Australia. I don't know if he mentioned that to you, right? But
he's actually.
Yeah. There's a very established connection between the two therapist communities, right? So
it's just so interesting because I never heard of it. And then when we met and you were telling me, that this had drastically changed your life. I mean, you literally just shared your story.
You're getting fresh with me. You got it, man. I'm, whatever. It's
all right. Let's set it up.
I know the voice. Does it help if I like talk in a really dorky voice so you don't get so like hot and bothered, or what's going on? I'm just kidding. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it is a really nice voice. So.
Whoa. What's going on there? Are you going to be okay there, doll?
Oh my God, stop. Just stop talking. Damn it, Chuck. Fuck it out. Where was I even going with that? I'm just completely lost track.
Spiders, but I'm here to fuck something.
Oh my Lord. Okay. Deep breath. Damn it. Oh my God. Okay. Anyway. We're good. We're back centered.
Yes.
You were just sharing basically with us, like, your story and everything that you've kind of gone through, and to take such a huge leap to then be like, you know what, fuck it. Like, you've met this incredible person, Mike, who's offered you a sponsorship. You've gone to a center. You've been able to continue with your Ashes to Awesome podcast, and now you're living in Thailand. Like, that's just unreal. Like, what a journey you've been on in the last few years away.
Absolutely crazy, right? Just absolutely nuts. And I got my dog. I guess I never talked about that, but I've got Sunny in the sidecar.
And was he a stray dog initially in Thailand?
Yeah, in Phuket he was. Yeah. Okay. So, it was a countryman of yours. Somebody that I had met at the center, lovely human being who actually lives in Hong Kong, but she's from Australia. Her godparents live in Phuket, Thailand, and they have a dog. They live in a condo. Apparently, they had to get a lawyer involved to get their dog at their condo because it's a no dogs kind of place or whatever.
Right.
So they had to like rewrite the bylaws for these people to have, and I guess when you have money, you can do things like that. But then they had found Sonny, as they ended up calling him on the beach, and just fell in love with him, and called the lawyer and said, "You think you could get a second?" And they're like, "No, it's not happening. You cannot have a second dog at that condo. Stop asking for dumb things." So, so they were desperately trying to find a home for him. And of course, through that other person, of course, I can't say her name because of, we're in a therapeutic environment and I'm on a public podcast, but she connected me with her godparents. And the day after I moved to Krabi, they came down here with their entourage. They hired a van and a driver and their assistant and their dog, and they all came down and brought me Sonny. And I'm like 25 minutes from the beach, I scooter drive, and they're like, "That's no good. Like, Sonny likes the beach. You need to be able to go to the beach with him." I said, "Well, I can't really do that on a scooter, right? Like, he's a 50-pound dog, right?" And so they're like, "Oh yeah, you can. We're gonna buy you a scooter and a sidecar." So they bought me a scooter and a sidecar, so I could take Sonny to the beach. Right. So I have a GoPro. Well, my cameras are all busted up now, and I'm a content creator without a phone, for crying out loud. But I did have, the camera rigged up on the sidecar, and I just kind of cruise around taking, footage of us and when we get to the beach and whatever. And the locals all think I'm nuts. They think I'm certifiably crazy. Do you remember here, a sidecar is like, it's a restaurant, it's a taxi cab, it's a moving truck. It's all of these things, right? Like the people, it's a family vehicle, So there is this crazy farang, those were called foreigners, run around. What the fuck is he got a dog in that thing? What?
Like, so he's got his own sidecar.
Oh yeah, right. But people love it. I love it, and it's what it's helped with me. Something I never could have imagined, Paris, is the connection. Right? He's a dog in a sidecar. People are curious. The kids, and I've always gotten along really well with kids, and they want to come around over. And Thai people don't really they don't love dogs the way that we love dogs. They love more like zoo animals when they love them. So like, they'll feed them with a kebab stick, right? They'll give them treats. So that's what I do is I grab these little sausages or whatever, and then I get the kids kebab sticks to feed them with, and they all love it.
Oh, that's so cool.
But it's enabled me to have connection with people that might normally never have spoken to even, right? So it's given me a sense of community that I never would have imagined. And that's so important in recovery, is to have, and I have a worldwide online community. I mean, the episode that I released today had 3 continents involved, right? So isn't that nuts, right?
That's so cool, but
it's nice to have some in-person contact too now and again, right? So
I mean, yeah, that I guess so.
yeah, right. But
if you say so, Chuck.
Can't just all be over the phone there, Gal.
We're not doing this again.
I think you're blushing right now. Oh my gosh. All right. Yeah. Anywho, right. So yeah. So yachts are completely changed my life. I'll sing them from the rooftops, and if somebody's got trauma holding them back, check them out, because they do online services as well. It's kind of an a la carte. I mean, Ideally everybody would experience a residential program, but they do have some online stuff going on as well. So
so can you tell us a little bit more about, I guess, even what the day in a life was like for you there at Yatra? Like, walk us through it.
So every day, breakfast. I mean, just my favorite part. I love food, right? Second favorite thing I do is eat. So let's be honest, that's the only thing I've done on my top list of 2s in a long time. But anyway, so when you get up in the morning, you go and you check your breakfast off, right? I started taking a swim early on in the day because I've got a big lap pool. So, I go check off on the menu what I want for my breakfast that day, and then go for a swim and come back up and eat. And then yoga. And after yoga, there's like an hour in between everything you do, at least an hour in between everything you do. So the yoga, and then maybe mindfulness, lunch, and then therapy. You get 4 sessions a week of therapy with Mike, or whichever therapist is on, I guess. And all the different things on the weekends. You've got excursions. Ice baths, things like that are optional, right? But meditation is definitely one of those things. Group therapy, I guess, is in there as well. So it's an agenda day. It's a really busy day without feeling busy, I guess is a way to put it, right? Because you have just enough time in between to kind of decompress, think about what just happened or what's going to happen, and kind of get into it.
I like that there is that bit of downtime as well in between. Like you're not just going straight into something else right after one another.
Yeah, right. It's not like high school where you've got block, right? It's like this kind of like chilled, and where that was, they're in a different facility now, which is just absolutely amazing. Very different than where they were. Where they were, it was a 9-bedroom mansion, right? And like I walked in and went, holy shit, man. It's like a 5-star hotel. Like opulence is the only word that I can use to describe it, right? Now it's a little more rustic, but it's every bit as comfortable, most certainly, right? They have a bunch of little one-off bungalows, like 1-bedroom bungalows for people on the property. And the property is huge, so it's very different layout, but it's something else, man. It's so cool what they got going on there now. But the therapy, so we did all the different therapies, the IFS, and that's a whole nother episode, Paris, to try and get into them all.
I understand.
and Mike, you can do that with Mike, and I bastardize things when I try and talk about them. The one thing that I do like to talk about is the EMDR, right? So the worst big T trauma, the thing that just literally kept me up at night, the thing that just, was holding me back in life, was this hostage situation thing. And at no point in EMDR do you have to talk about it. You have to give it a name. You can call it orange. It doesn't matter. You just need something to reference back and forth between each other, right? So I call it hostage, whatever. But when I wrote that down on the piece of paper, I melted down. Like that's where I was at. The moment I started thinking about it, that was it. It was over for me. 20 minutes later, and I've gone through the process with them, and I'm not going to try and explain what they do because, again, I'll just bastardize it. But 20 minutes later, the end of the session, I looked at him and said, fuck you, Mike. I was just completely taken back by, I can sit here and talk about this in a matter-of-fact way now, right? Like it desensitized every horrible thing about that, right? And still, it's almost 6 months later. It is 6 months later. Never mind. Actually, almost to the day, it would be 6 months later, and I'm cool, right?
Yeah.
When I get emotional now, it's because of this pure, unadulterated gratitude.
Yeah.
That I have for that experience, right?
Yeah. And I actually myself have tried EMDR, but I think I need to try it again with a different professional because I pretty much got re-traumatized.
Which I've heard before too, right? And it's like anything else. You have people that are great at it, people that aren't so much, right? And then never mind that the individual fit can always be a thing too. It's not about skill level. It's about how do you match up with somebody, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe yours just sucked. Mine didn't. Maybe yours did, right? So
Mike is good.
I didn't want to be hanging out there for you to have to say, so I'll just say it for you just in case, right? You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing.
That's the bonus, right? Get that free. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, thank you for talking about the Yatra Center and how they're involved in the Ashes to Awesome podcast now as a sponsor. So bringing back to your podcast and what you're getting up to, how do you choose your guest speakers and what are you hoping to bring to the conversation? Like, what are you trying to achieve every time you sit down with someone?
Well, there's a bunch of factors that go into it, and I'm sure you can relate. I mean, if I asked you that question, there's a bunch of different things that go into it. These days, and the show has evolved a lot, and for the purpose of time, I won't go into how everything used to work. I'll go into how things are now. I'll speak to the goal first because that explains so much. Our number one audience, the mission for me is about families more than anything. We talked about it earlier. People aren't tuning into a podcast, but their loved ones, their families, their mothers, their brothers, all these people are desperately searching for resources. And if I can connect with one of them, if I can find a way to help them to understand what's going on in their loved one's brain, I feel like that is my best way to help the people that are suffering. So it's not all about making sure the families are helped, though that is very much, because the trauma they're facing is unreal. The stigma they face is almost as intense as people that are in active addiction. It's crazy, the things that they have to deal with, but they don't, they're, for every person in addiction, there's at least 10 people that are affected by it, that aren't the people that are using, and they get 10% of the resources. Right. Yes. So, there is programs out there. So these days, my guests typically are people that agree with me on that. And of course, you've got influence as well, because you've got to grow the platform, right? So I like to pick from other content creators who kind of share some of the same values as me, though I do enjoy an opposing opinion, but these days less and less all the time do I come across that. I've got Lisa, Dr. Lisa, who you've met, of course, when you're on my show, who's a psychiatrist. I've got Mike, who's a clinician. Mike's going to be on the Weekend Ramble next weekend with me again. There's I'm trying to align myself with people that really know their shit at the end of the day, so that we can help the people that we want to help. Right. I mean, facts don't care about your feelings. And I don't want to hear people talk about how they think it's a choice and not a disease. I don't want to, I just, you know what I mean? Because there are arguments that are pointless in having.
It's not helpful. It's not helpful at all.
It's just not right. And really at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if it's a disease or not, right? Let's just talk about how to help people. You can call it whatever the fuck you want, right? But if you're coming from a place of compassion, I'll listen to what you've got to say. But I try really hard to find people whose values align with mine, where we're getting real information out. And I don't do the blood and gut stories anymore. Yeah. Typically when I have a guest on the show, it's like, okay, let's take 10 minutes to talk about your story, 20 minutes maybe to talk about your story. And then let's stop talking about the mess and start talking about the message. Right.
Yeah. I agree with that. I tend to not focus too much on the story unless I've got someone on who's particularly coming on to talk about their lived experience. We're kind of getting into a bit of the blood and guts.
Of course.
But,
of course. Yeah. I think it's kind of lowbrow to make that the focus, where people, and here's the thing though, when I got to that fence that I talked about earlier, that metaphoric fence, I stopped thinking that's what people wanted. I was projecting what I was reflecting.
Yeah.
Right. So when I got in my own recovery to a point where I was like, I'm done using, I'm done with all that, I want to start to grow. And then I really realized that the appetite wasn't for all that shit. The appetite was for growth, right? And what people want to do to move on and move upwards, right? So
and educating and spreading that awareness.
Absolutely, right. So there's all sorts of factors go in. Of course, we have our little circuit where we share people. As you know, I hear you got Haley coming on as well. She mentioned that to me.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Haley is wonderful. You're going to she's just the vibe. She giggles like, oh my Lord, she giggles. Hey, yeah. She's beautiful too. That doesn't hurt at all. Right? She's, yeah. Might have a little bit of a crush on Haley. Yeah. So.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. There you go. Sorry, Haley, I said it out loud. Yeah. Oh, she'll watch. Guarantee that. But yeah, she was really excited that you got in touch with her. So she had mentioned that to me yesterday. But yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet. I love that.
Yeah. She is so authentic and gracious. She's just absolutely happy to be alive. And just in a way that is so real and so authentic that it's how can you not like her? With her giggling and carrying on, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
And that's been one thing that I've been really grateful for in regards to starting a podcast, is connecting with so many like-minded people like yourself. Like when we first connected, I was just like, oh, and then you've introduced me to even more people since then. And I feel like I'm starting to develop this other community, outside of my day-to-day life in Australia. And I'm like, this is sick. And I love that there's just so many people who are just as passionate about helping people through addiction as I am. I can
You're
talk
not here
about
to fuck spiders, right?
I'm not here to fuck spiders.
See what I did there? Right? Yeah, all right.
And you used it correctly. That was a good job.
Yeah, well, I know you look at me and you think he's too pretty to be smart, but I've got the whole package going on here, right? Absolutely. Yeah.
He's not just
that funny. It's not that fucking funny. Come on, right? Jeez, right? Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
You're killing me. You're fucking killing me.
It's kind of my thing. It's kind of my mom said, if you could make him laugh, you could make him naked. Right? She never actually said that. She said if I got naked, I'd make them laugh. But you hear what you want to hear. So yeah. I've been using that line. I've been using that line since chat rooms on the internet, if you can imagine. Right?
Fucking good line though.
Yeah. It's worked a lot. It's worked a lot. I got a body count that proves it. Like that one works a lot. Yeah. Right. So back in my day,
Hot
back in
tip.
my time. Yeah, absolutely. Guys, if you're listening, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Note that one down.
Yeah. You probably fuck it up if you try and tell it, because everybody does when they try and repeat my jokes, but whatever. Right? So, yeah. Anyway.
Oh my gosh. One other thing that I
for
wanted to
$3.99
ask.
a minute, I will tell your dates, the jokes for you. Okay. Sorry.
And you're so funny. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Don't fuel the fire. Okay. Don't fuel the fire. Every time you say you're so funny, I'm like, oh, well, check this out, right? Like a fucking dancing monkey over here. So just stop talking about it and we'll be okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Oh my god. Okay, moving on. Can you share a particularly impactful moment or story from your podcast that resonated with you or your audience?
You know what? I will share a message I got just the other day. Just gonna pull it up here. Ooh, who did I send it to? Oh dear. Sorry, bear with me 1 second here.
You're good.
Oh, now I remember who I sent it to. Okay, let's see. Here we are. Okay, so this is somebody back in Canada. She lost her mom to addiction. Her and I actually we used together. She's kind of like one of the last people I ever got high with when I was still using. We went our separate ways, and it took her a little bit longer to embrace recovery than it did myself. But she's there now. Her grandma's a big part of her life. She has a newborn. Well, I guess her daughter's about 6 months old now. So when she found out she was pregnant, she quit. Right? She took the recovery journey. But so now her mom's passed on. She died of an overdose. But her grandma, her daughter are all a tight knit bunch. So. She sent me a message just the other day saying, I also want to let you know that what you're doing is really helping others. Grandma drives me to get my methadone every Thursday. And today in the car, she broke down crying about how much listening to you has helped her understand and feel better.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it just, Mom said that when you find your why, that's the why, right? This woman who has lost a daughter, who almost lost a granddaughter, and is now watching her great granddaughter grow up. I've somehow made even the smallest of positive impacts on her.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Right? Like that makes all of the sacrifice, all the shit worth it. Everything that I've gone through since I started this podcast. And my life's not an easy one here in Thailand. I mean, it's been a lot harder, but it's certainly not an easy one. I would do it 1,000 more times for one more of those messages. Right? Like it just, yeah. You don't need validation of purpose is enough to fuel my tank anyway. Right.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah. And I definitely feel that. I know even just, I guess, from being in that realm of addiction and suffering for so long to then come out the other side and be able to give back, I think is a huge way of healing yourself as well.
It without a doubt. Right. And that's step 12. If you're a 12 stepper, I'm not, and I know you're not either. Right. But I don't think you are, if I remember correctly. So
no, I was in 12 steps for like 3 months, and then I decided it wasn't for me.
But most of those fundamentals really do apply to recovery with a broad stroke, right? And the service aspect of it to me is huge, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you this, Paris. Had I gone and got a fucking job in a warehouse or whatever kind of job I was looking for when I couldn't get on a goddamn bus, had I done whatever the typical path would have been back then, there is no way I'm sober today. This podcast has helped. Now I could lose the podcast and I could maintain because I've but for that first year, this is what helped me stay on track, right? Because I got to live, eat, shit, and breathe recovery all day, every day, right? So, that's the service part is so important, right?
Yeah, definitely. I hear you there.
Yes.
Well, we're going to have to wrap up shortly. We're running out of time. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
we are. Eh? Yes, we are. No, that's the way it happens, right? All the time. So
It is.
we
It
can
is.
we can continue our conversation. I mean, maybe we should look at having you on the ramble with Mike next week. His lease is off. So.
Yeah. Actually, hold on. That's on the Friday,
neat.
isn't it?
No, for us it's Saturday night, late Saturday night.
Oh yes, I actually can do that.
You know what? We can do it anytime we want because we're all in the same time area, all three of us. It doesn't have to be Friday at fucking midnight or Saturday at midnight. It can be like whatever time, right? So let's talk about what works because look at that, eh? Oh yeah, I mean, like going to Lisa, and I was just like, I didn't have to do this starting at midnight shit again, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. But
absolutely.
I think actually that would be a really great way to do things. So yeah, maybe we should have a conversation. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, to wrap it up, what advice would you give any listeners who might be struggling with addiction or, have a loved one struggling with addiction and are just, seeking that extra support?
The same advice goes to both: connection. It is so unbelievably important. When I say, use the words "you are loved" when you're reaching out to somebody, don't believe for a second that your loved one knows that they're loved if they're the one suffering an addiction. Don't believe it. You think they do because you do love them, and it's a natural assumption to make. And you're like, well, they fucking know. But no, they don't. They're too busy surviving, and then all they know is whatever their addict brain is doing to them. So that perceived lack of connection was the boot on my neck. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to take the minute out of your day and text that person and let them know they're loved. Right. It's so unbelievably important, or call or make a Facebook post or whatever you do, whatever kind of communication you're doing with that person. Just make sure they know. Don't assume they know. I think it's the biggest misconception. And if you're in it and you want to get better, or especially if you're early recovering, you want to stay that way, start talking to people, make some community work for you, right? Really fast. Do that. Right. And the thing about craving, it's as soon as you say it to somebody who's a positive influence, the craving is gone. You release the power from your body as soon as you say it. You can't say it to somebody when you're using friends because then you're fucked, right? You can't even say it to somebody in early recovery. You have to say it to somebody who is, established. And if you tell on yourself about having a craving, that craving disappears real, real fast because you've now taken its power out of your body. So that'd be the two golden nuggets that I would leave for anybody that's interested in what I have to say, right? And
I think that was something as well that we didn't really get to touch on as well, is actually your "you are loved" message. I mean, that is a really big part behind what you do, as well as making sure that addicts do understand.
We did kind of talk about it. That came from Mom too, right? So
yeah.
I mean, we can finish off the episode with it if you want. If you want to do that, you don't have a canned response that I'm messing with there, because if you fuck with the ending of my show, we're gonna fight, right? Like I'm actually gonna fight you. So, right? I just but. If that's what you want to do, then let's do that, right? Of course, usually I do it with gratitudes, but I don't have to. It's your show. You can do whatever you want if you don't want. That's gratitudes. It's easier for me to do the outro with gratitudes first. So right, So no daily gratitudes today. No, right? Dropping hints.
I mean, we can do some
it makes the outro
gratitudes.
so much easier. I don't know how to do the outro without them because it got really fucking weird if we don't. So we got to do daily gratitudes. And they got to start with you, otherwise the outro gets. I don't know how to do it. So
all right, okay, all right. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So today I am grateful for
this voice.
Voice. I am. It's been very soothing on the ears. I'll be honest. I'm very grateful for it. It's been a wonderful experience.
He's making me blush now, right? Yeah. I'm gonna have to give you a spanking, right?
Behave.
Fuck's sakes. I'm sorry to your partner. I am. Yes. Anyway.
What are you grateful for, Chuck?
I'm grateful for the connections. It's always the connections through, the online community, the fact that we somehow linked up. A great conversation I had today on the podcast with an old friend from Active Addiction and Dr. Lisa again. I met so many wonderful people. I'm grateful for everybody who supports our platforms, who, whether it's on social media, whether it's listening, whether it's talking to people about it, doing all those things down at the bottom that you're supposed to do right now, like, comment, share, all that stuff. Do those things. Every time you do those things, you're getting us a little bit closer to living our best lives. Our best lives is to make a humble living, spreading the message. The message is this: if you're in active addiction right now, today could be the day. Today could be the day that you start a lifelong journey. Reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, call into detox, go to a meeting, go to church, pray. I don't give a shit. Do whatever it is you got to do to get that journey started, because it is so much better than the alternative. And if you have a loved one who's suffering an addiction right now, just taking the time to listen to this conversation, mostly serious conversation, you just take one more minute out of your day and text that person, let them know they're loved. Use the words,
"You are loved."
That little glimmer of hope just might be the thing that brings them back.
That was a beautiful